Hey guys, this is Nicole at Flag Motorsports. We are starting a series called Teardown Tuesdays, where we are going to tear down some of the core engines that we get, maybe some customer engines that we get, because we believe that there is a lot of valuable education that you can get from tearing down an engine. There's a lot of signs that you can see, whether it's bearing wear, skirt wear, whether it's marks in the bores themselves, marks on the mains, that tell you what type of life the engine lived. They can tell you how many oil changes this engine received, how often they received oil changes, and they can tell you what ultimately brought them out of the vehicle and into our shop. So this is going to be the start of our series. We're starting with a very grimy 6.0 here. So this is going to be an iron block, and we've got some interesting things already at play here with this engine that I'm excited to tear into. So as we go, you're going to hear some commentary from me. You're going to hear some commentary from my partner, Evan, and he's going to explain what all of the signs and all of the marks inside of the engine mean. And hopefully you'll learn something from this. So let's get into it. All right, guys, so let's start off by talking about some facts about this engine. So this is what we call a Gen 3.5 6.0, and the reason that we call it a Gen 3.5 is because this is a Gen 3 block. You can tell that by the fact that the knock sensors are in the valley, by the fact that the cam position sensor is in the rear, and by the fact that this is a 24X reluctor wheel. The reason that we say Gen 3.5 is because it actually has the Gen 4 rods, which are stronger, better floating wrist pin rods. So that is a big benefit. That's something to look for. The other thing that gives this away as a Gen 3 block is the oil galley in the rear is just these two holes. So on Gen 4, they've actually opened up this entire oil galley because they were having oiling issues in the back here. And the last thing that I want to point out is how small the oil opening on the cam bearings is. That's something that's indicative of Gen 3 as well. In Gen 4, the cam bearings are going to have a bigger hole for the oil to pass through. So I'm going to flip this over. And this is where we can see that 24X reluctor wheel. This is where we can see our Gen 4 rods. You can tell these super clearly because they're squared off. The other thing I should have mentioned when I was over on top here is that the reason that I knew that this was an LQ4 is because of the slightly dished piston. These are going to be out of Chevrolet products from 2005 to 2007 roughly, and they're going to be in like the half-ton, three-quarter-ton offerings. So this might have been Silverado, this might have been Escalade, but we are going to learn more about what happened to this engine and why it came out of whatever truck or vehicle it was in right about now when we start tearing into it. So here we go. All right, so let's start with the lifters. I can see that this tray is already chipped, but I'm guessing that this is more from something that happened in the yard. So one sign of good lifter trays is that it should actually be kind of difficult to get lifters in and out of the trays. This tells me, among other signs, of course, that this is a very high mile engine because of how easily these trays are coming out and how little retention of the lifters themselves we're getting from these trays. Let's see if I can grab them out. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. Okay, so this is actually interesting. This is a surprisingly decent looking lifter wheel. Usually we'll see a lot more pitting, scratches, marks on this. So that's something that's interesting as well. Now there's no cam in here, so some of these are going to fall through and hit rock bottom again. So there's a little bit of that scratch. You can see it. There's a little scratch in that one, but we've seen ones that look a heck of a lot worse. So let's keep going here. Well, that one's got a bunch of crud on it. Now, it's not like I'm going to reuse these lifters, but I am going to set them to the side so that we can look at them a little bit more up close as they come out. So if I get a stubborn one like this, I can get lucky on these back bores because I can actually fit my finger through here. Might have to bust out the magnet, but the best thing for these, Snap-on makes this little pocket plier. I'm really excited to show you guys if I get the chance to use it. This is a really surprisingly nice looking lifter wheel. Wow. I was expecting to see a lot worse. All right, so I'm going to try the magnet on these guys first. Sometimes you can get lucky with a magnet, especially if I can push them through. And this engine came to us in this condition with no camshaft. Usually we would pull lifters before we pulled the cam so that they didn't drop through. But that won't always be what you get. So just surprisingly nice condition on these. So that tells me that this engine is probably not here because of a lifter failure, which is one of the more common causes of death, I would say, with these LS engines. Super common. And there's the other ones hitting the ground that were already falling through and sticking out. So let's go ahead. I'm going to take off these side cap bolts here. And I'm just going to do that before I forget because they're already kind of in the grime. And then I'm going to move on and I'm going to do all of the rods. Okay, so our microphone died when I pulled this first one. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the second one. So I'm going to loosen the lower bearing shell. I like to mix these up because in my mind, this is the upper and this is the lower, but that's very wrong. This is the lower, this is the upper, okay? So don't eviscerate me in the comments when I inevitably mix this up in the future. But I'm gonna pull off the lower bearing half and then I'm going to call my partner in to play catch the piston for delivery because otherwise you have to catch it with your leg and sometimes you miss and they hit the ground and we're trying to discover what was wrong with this engine and I don't want to cause any impact marks to falsify our data. So let's go ahead and get this off here. All right, so there's this. Evan, would you be so kind as to play catch the piston?
I think they called us the midwife.
Yes, Evan is on midwife duty currently. So when you take these apart, I like to try to push them as far as I can because sometimes you get lucky and you can actually push them all the way out like that. Other times I use the back end of a rubber mallet because it's nice and soft. It's not really going to cause any damage. And it's a good tool for getting them apart like that.
Where'd the cap go?
I just put it right there. Oh. Okay. So I'm going to take my wrench. We're laying them out in a line on our teardown bench here so that we can kind of keep them in order for diagnostic purposes. I'm going to spin this over until I get to 3 and 4 here in a position where I can get to both with the impact. Pick back up my impact. I need one of those
holster.
Little holster devices.
Keep the big iron on your hip.
Yeah. I actually don't really love air tools. I like a regular impact better, but that's okay. Here's that. Let's flip around. Play midwife on that side. It's a little bit harder when you take out the first one because you can't fit your hand.
Yeah, you have less room for your hand to go in there.
As far in there. So yeah, I'm going to need to use the back half of the hammer a little bit, unless Evan can get his hands in there. Oh, he's got the technique.
The G.I. Joe lifelike grip.
He's got the technique. All right.
Actually looks really good. What's interesting is you can tell it's a higher mileage engine because, so normally on a new piston, this is going to be all covered in a black skirt coating on a factory piston. And you can just see the very edge of what's left of that here. And that's gone, which tells me that this motor has a lot of miles on it. And the other thing it tells me is because the sides of this piston are so clean and stuff like that, this was getting fuel washed. And what that means is fuel is getting past these rings when it's not supposed to be, and it's diluting the oil film that's supposed to be protecting this piston. And so what we're seeing here is basically just a really high mileage motor. So this thing was probably smoking, it was probably burning oil, and it probably was losing power and efficiency and stuff like that. So because we're really not seeing anything else, I mean, these bearings look great. They're just worn, but there's no there's nothing wrong with them. And
there's no damnation.
There's probably not very much wrong with this engine other than the fact that it just was really tired.
Probably at least 200,000-300,000 miles.
If
also
I had
based
to
on the
guess.
sled.
Working?
I don't know.
All right, well.
All right.
Okay.
Here we go. Same situation with this one. Just looks good. And this time I should be able to... I almost can't quite push it all the way through. Yeah, let me get the hammer. Quit showing me up, dog. Let me get in here. There we go. And
Same deal on this one.
Takes.
This one has a little bit more of that skirt coating that I was talking about still, but yeah, nothing really too crazy going on with these. These rings are really worn.
Lower looks good. Same bearing looks good.
Yeah, same situation. Upper looks just the same. So I'll get back into these rings later.
We're talking about tang to tang.
Yeah, so the way you can tell which way these caps go, because which way this goes is super critical. The OEM caps are cracked cap, and what that means is when they make this rod, they literally just judo chop it in half, and where it breaks is where it breaks. So you can actually see the texture, the grain of the metal there. So these ones you can't really mix up because you put it backwards, like it clearly doesn't match. But if you put it the right way, it like lines up. It's like a, you know, fingerprint where it kind of only goes one way. But the other way to tell, and like aftermarket rods don't have that. So the way to tell is your bearing tangs are always going to line up. So that's the easiest way to make sure you're putting the cap back on the right way.
I'm also not expecting to see a whole ton of severe damage on this engine because it always spun over. So usually if we see really severe damage, they are not going to spin over like that.
Or they have a rough spot or something.
Yeah, I'm going to start with this one on this side because you're already on that side. Did I spray you with that one a little bit?
Yeah, it's okay. I'm in the splash zone. That's why they call me the midwife, you know?
Oh, okay. Good Lord. There we go.
It's a boy.
Okay.
Same thing, nothing new. This one has a little groove in it. Nothing bad. It just a piece of little grit went through it at some point, but
yeah,
I'm not seeing anything really bad. Yeah.
On the lower. Nobody talk about it. We're gonna play it so cool when I keep doing that. I also don't care if you leave that in the video, Ryan, where I keep mixing that up because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, this one's not gonna go.
Okay.
Just thought of a funny idea.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Yeah. Same. What's interesting is there's actually no wear on the skirt. The coating is just gone. But there's no grooves, scratches, anything. But it's like the coating has been washed off, which I guess is the case because of the likely this thing just being worn out.
They start to get really, really easy to turn at the end.
I wonder why.
Oh no, I dropped $20.
Oh, hell yeah.
No, get out of there with your grimy hands.
All right.
Just leave it on the floor.
$20.
It's a little gift for our viewers. Not quite.
Nope. Same story on this one. So this is number 7, and sure enough, see how there's actually some scuffing here? So that's where we lost our oil film, because this piston's never actually supposed to touch the cylinder wall. Only the rings are supposed to touch, and the problem with when it does touch is this piston's going to expand with heat and actually scuff on the cylinder wall. We always see this on number 7 and number 8, but that's particularly number 7. If there is going to be a piston that's damaged by scuffing and overheating and something like that, it's going to be this piston, and that's what those black lines right are. And that's going to be where this expanded to the point where it was actually rubbing on the cylinder wall and creating friction.
And why does that happen on 7 and 8?
There's no coolant crossover from the factory application on these, so there's nowhere for air bubbles to escape on the rear of the engine. And all the coolant crossing over is happening in the front of the motor with the water pump and stuff like that. So the rear of the motor will get more hot spots and stuff like that. So that's why sometimes on race applications and stuff like that, people will add a little bit of extra fuel on the back 2 cylinders to try to help cool them down. But yeah, it's a super common issue we see with these. If there is going to be a heat issue, it's always going to be on 7 or 8.
So this tells me that there's probably nothing wrong with the mains because this is by hand and I'm not putting that much force behind it. And we're getting this much spin. So it's actually pretty uncommon to spin a main on an LS, or pardon me, an LS architecture engine, because technically the iron blocks are not LSs. As I said earlier, this is an LQ4. So LS are going to be the aluminum version of these. But this particular architecture does not spin mains very often. They spin rod bearings much more commonly, but mains, it's atypical for them to spin. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, it happens, but it's not going to be as common as spinning a rod. We see spun rod bearings all the time. All right, so that's going to be my outer size. So like we talked about, when we are going to remove a crankshaft, we're going to start at the outsides and work our way in. And we are also going to start physically with the outside studs and then break loose our inside ones. So. So now I'm going to go through and use our handy dandy main cap puller for this. You can use two like metal rods and kind of pop them up. Listen, we had to buy this because we're an LS and LT specialty shop and we do this day in and day out. I'm still mad about how much they charge for these. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how much I paid for this piece of metal that just leverages in and pops up a dang main cap. You know, it's not, it makes me a little angry, I'm not going to lie to you. So. That looks great. Just looks great. The bearings on this are totally fine. This was mostly just a mileage thing. So I'm going to go through, pop them up, put them in order. LS main caps come numerically stamped already, just in case. So I'm just going to go through and make this easy for myself and put them on the table, and then Evan can give you his opinion on thrust bearing wear, on main cap wear in general, how the crank looks. But again, based on how nicely this crank spun over, I already know that these are going to be totally fine. All right, and our last guy. A little sticky on this one. Let's pop it from the other side too. There we go. Okay. Put this over here and then I'll pull the crank out. Okay, so pulling a crank is not for the faint of heart. These things are heavy. So I usually hook 3 fingers in the reluctor wheel, and I do this because otherwise if you grab the back, it makes it a little tricky to set down. So I'm gonna hook 3 fingers, grab up here, pull it now. Over, set it in. All right, so now we can look at our main bearings. We can get a whole view of the entire motor, and we can look at the main caps as well.
So now that we've gotten it all apart, we can really get a better idea of what was going on with this thing. Like Nicole's been saying, we don't really think there was any major failure with this. I think it was just a matter of kind of high mileage, and I can kind of go over why I think that is. So if we look at these main bearings, they actually look great. There's no pitting, there's no scoring, there's no embedded foreign material, there's literally no issue with these. The only thing I see is that they're dull in color. A new GM bearing is going to be shiny. You can actually see it, hopefully it shows up on camera, but in the groove is actually shiny. That's the surface finish that this bearing used to have. So what's happened is, like I had talked about when the pistons were coming out, what has happened is basically the fuel has gotten past these rings. So if we look at these rings, there's a lot of wear on them. And this is going to be hard to express through the camera, but these have lost a lot of their sealing ability, and that's become very apparent, and I'll come back to the block on why. But these have lost the ability to seal, and so what's happened is fuel's getting passed, it's wiped off most of the skirt coating. The engine's still running great because the skirt is not scuffed, it is not damaged, it's not rubbing on the cylinder wall except for number 7 like we touched on. And so what I'm seeing is evidence of that in the bearings too. So these bearings are a dull color, like the main bearings and the connecting rod bearings. They're like a satin sheen, and there's no damage or anything like that, but that's just an indication of basically a lot of time and fuel washing out the lubricity of the oil. So that's what we're seeing here. And if we look at our lower main bearing shells, we're going to have more of the same story. I'm not really seeing any damage, any foreign debris, nothing really that bad. And this engine wasn't really abused because the main caps, you'd see fretting, and what fretting is evidence of the main cap wiggling around in the block. And so what that'll show up is really big black marks and stuff like that. You'll see an outline of where the cap was. You can see it here where there's oil staining, but there's no wear mark here. There's no, that just wipes off, and there's no ledge, nothing like that. You see it a lot worse on aluminum blocks, but if this engine had been abused, a lot of high RPM and stuff like that, you'd see these moving around, and we don't really see any of that. The cam bearings actually look surprisingly good, and that is basically they haven't spun yet. Typically in 6 liters, at least 1 out of every 5 blocks that we get, the cam bearings is spun, and it actually trashes the block. So if we look at these, there's a ton of staining, a ton of issues with these cam bearings. I mean, these are disgusting. And so that's just an issue with these Gen 3 blocks where they don't have that crossover. They don't get as good an oil flow in the cam. But let me get this block flipped over, and then we'll talk about kind of what I was seeing in the bores. So what we're looking at here, we got the block flipped over. I'm looking at our bores, and yeah, this block's just really tired. You can see, if we look at different parts of the bore, hoping you can see it on camera, there's going to be some very faint cross hatching, and that's those 45-degree lines that we're seeing on here that go across. Those are there to hold oil in place so that your piston has a cushion of oil to ride on all the time. And that's what prevents wear and allows your engine to go for 200-something thousand miles. So if we look at the actual bottom of the bore, and this, you know, let Ryan do his best to trying to catch this on film. Maybe we'll do a different shot, but you can see where the piston stopped its travel and was coming back up. And so that area actually has no wear and has the original cross hatching from the factory in it still. But like I said, I think that this engine is just a case of a lot of miles and nothing really wrong with it. So moving forward on this, I'm not really too worried about cracks. I'm not too worried about abuse or overheating or anything like that. I didn't see real evidence of that. So with this one, we're basically just going to be reconditioning it and rebuilding it into something better.
So now you've seen what a teardown on an LS architecture engine looks like. This was obviously a 6.0 LQ4, didn't have a catastrophic failure, not one of our more exciting teardowns. Cut to that scene of the chunk of block falling off and hitting the oil. But I hope that this gave you a good look into what just a tired motor looks like, what you would see when you took apart a good condition junkyard motor. This is something that we wanted to do with this series as well, is give you guys an idea of what to look for when you try to buy a used motor and some red flags to look for. So now you've seen what it can look like when one that was just worn out and tired comes apart. This is a good buy. I would be very happy to buy this from a junkyard as opposed to one that had had a catastrophic failure, one that would require much more machine work. So this will go on and be rebuilt, totally reconditioned into a beautiful, fully repainted, fully rebuilt motor. But for now, this is going to be a solid base, and this will give you a good idea of bearing wear, skirt wear, cam bearing, Gen 3 versus Gen 4 block, Gen 4 rod combos. So I really hope that this was a useful video for you guys. We're going to be doing these hopefully every Tuesday. And we will catch you on the next one, where hopefully we get a little bit more exciting of a cause of death.